recording if you...
Okay, you ready to go?
Yeah,
Okay.
should we set up?
All right, well, thank you for coming. As you can see, I'm going to talk about this fascinating topic, mechanization and the Vietnamese rice farmer. No, I am not Vietnamese, and I'm not a rice farmer. So I will go in and try to lead you through this twisted path that I carved to end up in rice fields in North Vietnam. Okay. So, without further ado, I am going to talk about the Vietnamese rice farmers, their villages, their way of life, their culture, and how modernization or mechanization of the farm life is changing their culture. I am not a scientist, I'm a journalist. This is not a scientific lecture or paper or anything like that. Most of the information I'm going to give to you tonight comes from either the U.S. government or the Vietnamese government. Most of it comes from boots on the ground, me being there. My wife is Vietnamese, so a lot of this comes, and she is a rice farmer. This comes from her family, her friends, the people I interviewed last summer while I was in Vietnam during the harvest. So there is a great concern about the mechanization, and I'll get into what that really means. But basically what they're doing is what we did 80, 90 years ago with machinery. By bringing in basically combines and modern farm equipment to replace which had always been manual labor of planting and harvesting rice. Okay, so it is a big concern there. Being in a communist country, they don't voice that concern a whole lot in the media. Okay, so anyway, last summer, or the summer of 2019, I did spend several weeks living in my wife's rice farming village in Vinh Phuc province, which is about an hour northwest of Hanoi. I've spent quite a bit of time in Vietnam, but had never spent any time in the north because there had always been a perception that the North Vietnamese really don't care much for Americans, as you can imagine why. That is not true, and I'll get into that a little bit too. I did witness the laborious task of harvesting the grain, which is done by hand, and I'm going to send this around using nothing but one of these. And I'll get into this stuff. Okay, so a little bit of background. My name is Will Seitz. I am a Missouri native. I'm from Franklin County, Missouri, which is about 3 counties east of here. If you take off east on Highway 50 and head towards St. Louis, you'll almost run into my house. Okay, I am an associate professor of journalism at nearby Lincoln University. I've been there. This is my 7th year at Lincoln. I teach just about everything. Do I need to wear this? Is anybody safe if I don't? Are you okay if I don't?
You're far enough away.
Yeah, okay, thank you. About to burn up. Anyway, I teach just about everything journalism, including news reporting and writing, photojournalism, media law, history of journalism, public relations, just about everything. I also supervise the campus online newspaper. I have a BS degree in journalism from the University of North Alabama and a master's degree in environmental journalism from the University of Nevada, Reno. My background in journalism includes being a reporter, an editor, a photojournalist, a newspaper owner, newspaper publisher, and online news entrepreneur. Okay, so how did I get here? Well, let's just find out. Okay, so this is about the rice harvest. And as you can see here, this woman is harvesting by hand. This is all manual labor. There's very little machinery used today in these small rice farms. I began traveling in China and Southeast Asia about 10 years ago. So I'm going to tell you a little bit how I ended up in the middle of a rice field in northern Vietnam. About 10 years ago, I was dating a woman from St. Louis who was Chinese. and she has some background in journalism. And of course, being a journalist, I became fascinated by how journalism works in a communist country. And so I really wanted to kind of find out, what's going on in China with journalism. I was reading a lot of English language journalism news websites from China, watching Chinese news online and stuff. So I decided to go, and I planned a trip with my girlfriend to go and spend about a month traveling in China. Something happened and she couldn't go. I ended up going anyway. Okay, I made some connections there with some journalism students and some journalists that would talk with me, and some other people that had some insight into what was going on in China. So anyway, I did go, and I spent 3 weeks traveling in central, eastern, and northern China. I spent about a week on the North Korean border, and in the city of Dandong, which was a fascinating place just for the mysterious part of it. I literally stood just feet from a fence where there was an armed North Korean guard standing there staring at me, and started yelling at me because I was taking pictures and you're not supposed to. And two Chinese military guys told my girlfriend to tell me, or told my friend that I was with to tell me that if they grab me, they can't do anything. So you need to kind of back up. So I did. Anyway, interesting. So after that, I was kind of hooked on the whole experience of being in a communist country and how journalism works in a communist country. And after spending, I probably went back to China 4 or 5 times and developed some really good contacts there, and some journalists that would actually talk with me about how they're censored and what happens there. Anyway, one thing I did learn is how much I love the First Amendment here, because there is absolute censorship there, and journalists do disappear. So, a few years after that, I'd had a lot of connections in China and in Southeast Asia, and I was contacted by somebody to go to Cambodia, which I'll show you a map here in a minute. With Cambodia, if you don't know where it is, it's just southwest of China, and it's borders Vietnam, and Vietnam is just south of China. To go to Cambodia to possibly start a program. There's an English language program at a university that would teach journalism to students, teach journalism in the sense of how to report on government affairs without ending up upside down in the Mekong River. Okay, because most people don't understand that Cambodia is a relatively new government. It was established in the early 90s and is kind of overseen or supervised by the UN. And it's a very unstable place. But they were committing to more transparency and wanted to start a program of teaching journalists how to report on the government. And so I kind of got involved in that. And while I was there for my final interview and decide if I was going to do it or not, chaos just broke out. And there were people running around with machine guns. People were shot. They put concertina wire all over the streets.
And what year was this?
This was in 2013, I believe. It was during when Hun Sen and a couple of other political rivals kind of accused each other of cheating, and they ran him out of the country. It was insane. Anyway, so I boarded a bus and I headed to Vietnam. And that's really how I started my fascination with Vietnam. So after that, being in Vietnam for a couple of weeks, I fell in love with the country. I fell in love with the people, the culture, the food. There was nothing that I didn't love and don't love about Vietnam. It's an excellent country. People are extraordinarily friendly, and it's a very safe country to travel in. Cambodia, on the other hand, was an extremely dangerous place to be for an American. But you think of a communist country, you kind of think, and a place where we fought for 12, 13 years would be a little unsafe for Americans. It's just the opposite. They recognize the value of an American as a tourist and the money that we bring, and they guard you Well, I mean, anybody messes with you, the police are right on top of them. So it's a very, very safe place to be. So how did I end up in a rice field? Well, in 2015, I wanted to do some scuba diving and snorkeling in a place called Nha Trang. Nha Trang is a coastal city almost halfway up the coast between the north part of Vietnam and the south part. They'd had a Miss Universe pageant there. This is like considered to be one of the best beach areas and one of the best South China Sea resort areas in Southeast Asia. So I decided I was going to make that my destination, do a little diving, which I like to do. So I always look for somebody. I don't travel anywhere in non-English speaking countries without having a minder or having a translator or somebody to keep me out of trouble, okay? It's a really smart move for me, and it's worked very well. Every time I'm by myself, something happens. So I found somebody that spoke English, was college educated, and knew Nha Trang very well. And her name was Yen, and so I went to Nha Trang, and one thing led to another. Now I call her my wife, queen, everything else, okay? So we met, and once we spent a lot of time together, and over a period of time, we decided to get married. And I don't know if you've ever seen the show 90 Day Fiancé, but that's exactly what we went through. We went through the K-1 visa. She was not from Nha Trang, but she had been there for work. And she decided to move back home because she was going to have to get a lot of papers. She was going to have to do a lot of things with the government to get a visa. And she moved back home, which I found out was a little place called Phu Han. Phu Han is a village outside of Hanoi. There's about 200 homes, and they never give you a population. They just tell you how many houses are in their city. 200 homes in this community. They're all rice farmers. They're either merchants or they're rice farmers. This place is tiny, and it's in the middle of kind of nowhere, about an hour outside of Hanoi. So she moved back home, and eventually, of course, I would end up in Yen's village to meet my future in-laws. Okay, so anyway, Phu Han village. Let me speed this up a little bit. There's the rice harvest there. I'm going to pass this around. As you can see, this is what they use. This is a bamboo stick. This, I don't know how old, it's very, very old. It's very flexible. It can lift over 100 pounds, and you can see that they carry the cut rice using straps that go around these notches on here. I'll pass this around. It's very cool. It's very slick. It's very used. That belonged to her father, actually. I bartered for that last time I was there. And this is how they carry it. What this lady here is carrying is probably weighs anywhere from 60 to 80 pounds. And she's tiny. Just getting ahead of myself. This is me traveling in Saigon. Saigon, everyone knows Saigon. It's really called Ho Chi Minh City after the war. Saigon is in the very southern part of the country, and I'll get into it a little bit more later what the really difference is between South and North Vietnam. A lot of people don't know. I'll explain it. My mom always says that looks like I'm being chased down the street, and it kind of in my mind it kind of was a little fantasy I played out too. I'm like, oh, they're coming after the American spy guy, you know, but they really were. But that is in Saigon too. Everybody travels by motorbike. There's over 2 million scooters in Saigon.
How big is Saigon?
It's about 9 million.
Whoa.
Yes. It is the biggest city. It is the biggest city in Vietnam. Hanoi is the second biggest city, and Hanoi is the capital. But they're both about 9 million, upwards of 10 million. Yeah, hey Americans, stick to teaching. I was trying to cut rice. She is laughing at me. I'm telling you, I'm going to pass this around. If you want to take it out of here, you can. It is very sharp. But this is what they use. That is a rice cutting knife. So this is in the village here, and I'm trying to learn how to cut rice. I wasn't really cutting it, I was more like sawing it, and they were like, nah, that's not gonna work. As you can see here, and so I put on the hat because I thought maybe that would give me some magic or something, but it didn't do anything but make me look stupid, so. But I tried. And here I am trying to carry rice using this bamboo stick. I could not believe how heavy it was, and a little old lady was carrying it before I was. And I tried to carry it, and I could barely lift it. And I think they said it weighed about around 70 pounds. I think it was breaking my neck. I was doing it wrong completely, and they were just laughing at me. So, anyway, okay. So Fuhan Village, where I did my rice harvesting photojournalism work, is about 200 families. It's a very rich but very rural rice farming area along near the Red River. One of the things that's interesting too is that the village is located. The village is located near some what they call enterprise zones. Enterprise zones is a new thing in Vietnam, and it's very connected to what's going on with the farming. Enterprise zones are these massive factory complexes where upwards of 5,000 to 10,000 people might work. Okay, you'll see Samsung. 40% of all cell phones in the world made by Samsung are made in Vietnam. They're the #1 foreign investor in Vietnam. Samsung is there. You'll see Honda. You'll see Levi's. You'll see Nike, Adidas, Boeing, GM, GE, LG. There's these huge companies that we all know are located in Vietnam, and they're building even more now because they're leaving China. Because of the whole American, not just Americans, but Koreans and the Japanese are having a lot of conflicts with China, and whether it's over intellectual property or over its subsidies and things like that, tariffs. A lot of the manufacturing is just moving a little bit south, right out of China and right into Vietnam. And these things are being built as we speak, massive industrial complexes. And they're built in these rural areas. Why? 2 good reasons. One, they have a ready workforce of young people who would love to do anything but cut rice. Okay? They're Vietnam is a very young country as far as population. Their population, I think, is average age is like 26 or something. It's very young. They have a ready workforce. And out in these rural areas, they don't have to compete for natural resources. They're given, the government gives them the land and gives them all the water and electric and resources they can use. So they have a ready and willing young labor force and plenty of natural resources to use. So these things are growing quickly. And the young people look at spending 12 hours in the field for $1 a day, or going to the Honda factory, which is air conditioned, working 5 days a week, getting insurance, a medical care, getting a pension, getting good working conditions. That's where they go. They have weekends off. They're making great money, and they're building homes. It's an amazing thing. The problem is, who's left to do the rice? What I saw in my time there, the average age of the worker in the field was probably at least mid-50s to 60s, and 99% women. So we have an aging workforce, aging labor force in the fields. Young people won't do it. They simply go to the factories and they make way more money. The average farmer only makes a couple $1,000s a year. You can make 4, 5, 6, 7 times that in a factory. So who wants to work in the fields? Nobody. Anyway, getting ahead of myself. Okay, so also the rural labor force has starting wages that are much lower than in the city. So if you're in Hanoi, the labor is much more expensive. They can come out to the country where people live, basically young people all live at home. You have most of your homes are 2 and 3 generations. And there's no such thing as what we do here, where kids leave when they're 18 and go off on their own. There, everybody lives in homes that have been there for decades or longer. Okay, so mainly women and kids will work in the fields. Men run businesses. Like my father-in-law owns a bicycle fix-it shop. That's what he does all day. And my mother-in-law works in the fields all day. They grow corn 2 times a year. Rice 2 times a year and corn one time a year. So something's growing most of the time.
Is that in the same field, they get those 3 crops, 2
They
rice,
do.
1 corn?
They do.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, when one comes out, another one goes in. They don't waste any time. Land and its use is transferred through either sons, paternally, or through marriage. Now, unfortunately for my in-laws, they had 3 daughters. So when those daughters marry, they're gone. They go and they live with their husband's family. So there's really nobody to pass this land down to, and that's an issue too. So in Vietnam, if you don't use the land, you lose it because the government owns the land. Technically, they own the land. You don't. You own it for a period of 70 years, and then if you're still using it at the end of that 70 years, you can re-up for another 70. But if they want to take it to build a hospital or a park or a highway, they just take it, throw you a couple bucks, and that's it. And if you quit using your land for farming, they'll take it quickly, and they'll give it to somebody that will farm it. And you're done. So in my extended family in Vietnam, it's a problem because there are no sons. Nobody there to really take it over, except for me, maybe. Anyway, so you got to use the land or you lose it. Now, let me give you just a little bit of quick facts about Vietnam, the country. Everybody knows where it's located, right? It's located in Southeast Asia. Let me see if I have a map here. Look at that. I was even Lincoln. Look at that. I'm in China, and I'm advertising Lincoln. You know. This is one of the reasons why I went to China to study. What they do there is fascinating. Every time a paper comes out, they put the newspaper in a glass case so everyone can read it. It's their way of getting the government information to you, and you have no excuse for not knowing what's going on. But people will stand there and read the entire paper. It's cool. I love it. I thought this would be a great thing to do here, you know, since people won't buy the newspaper, just give it away. I went to do a lot of photography in Cambodia, and one of my favorite things was the boats and the fishing along the Mekong River. Fascinating. Get it a little bit ahead. Okay. This is when we met. We met in the trunk. This was horrible. I took her out on a boat to do some snorkeling. And one, she doesn't swim, because very few people do in Vietnam. And secondly, she got so seasick that they had to bring a boat out to get her. She was that sick, and she's throwing up in the water, and here's all these people diving in the water. I'm like, yeah, stupid American.
Pronounce her name slowly for us.
Yen, just like Japanese money.
Yen.
Yen, Y-E-N. Her last name is Le. Yep.
Oh, is that her name or the name of the town?
That's the name of the town,
Oh,
not
I thought
Trong.
it was her name.
No,
Oh, okay.
that's not Trong, Vietnam. That's a
Okay.
coastal city in Vietnam. If you don't know where Vietnam is located, it's right here. This is all China right in here. Okay, Vietnam is along here. This is China. This is Vietnam, this sliver of green right here. And the top is where she's from, and the bottom, of course, is Saigon and everything in between. And the Trong's almost about half, not quite halfway up, but it's right in here somewhere. Okay, so the location, of course, you can see where it's located. It's very close to the equator. The size of Vietnam is slightly larger than the state of New Mexico. And there's roughly 100 million people there. A little bit bigger than the size of New Mexico, and almost 100 million people. It doesn't seem like there's that many people there, but there is. Hanoi is the capital and has been since the Vietnam War ended in 1975. when the South and North merged. During the Vietnam War, of course, there was South Vietnam, the country, and North Vietnam, the country. The North wanted to take over South Vietnam and ultimately did. It is known as the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. It's one of 5 truly communist countries on the planet. The other ones being what?
China.
China?
Cuba,
Cuba?
Venezuela.
No, Venezuela's close. It's close to being a pure communist country, but it's not quite. Laos, which is a neighbor of Vietnam's, and North Korea. So there's 5 of them. Yeah, we forget about that crazy guy over there sometimes. Anyway, it is one of 5 communist countries. I will tell you that Vietnam is probably the least communist of them all. It is a very market-driven, fairly transparent country. Still a lot of corruption going on there, but it's very westernized. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we were there for a long time. It is a big player. It is considered to be the fastest growing, at least pre-pandemic, it was the fastest growing country in the world, growing at 6% annually. That's a lot. Exports, it's, in the last decade, exports to America went from 15 billion to more than 66 billion. That's a lot. And you'll find a lot of, there's just a ton of manufacturing there, but they also are second in coffee exports next to Brazil. They are number 1 in cashews in the world, number 5 in rice production in the world. They also are fairly large in petroleum, electronics, machinery, furniture, and pepper. They do a lot. Okay. And another interesting thing is religion. And I think I actually have a very interesting photo I took. That's my mother-in-law, my wife's house in her village, and that's me on a motorbike, probably scaring the heck out of everybody that sees this. I look like I'm really tall and big. You know, they call me the big fat American over there. You know, I'm 5'10", and they think I'm like 7 foot. You know. So they see me coming, and all the little kids are pointing at me. These villages are they're just very quaint, very rural, very quiet. This is some of her neighbors. All the little kids come out and point and yell and run and always want to practice the English, which it consists of hello, hello, hello. It sounds like a minor bird all day long. You just keep hearing hello, hello, hello. So it's kind of cute. But they love Americans. They just love Americans. So it's nice to feel like you're really special for a while. Just farming. You can see it's mostly women. There is a man in the background there. But they're heading out. In her village, they have one market. And in this market, it's only open during certain times of the day, and you buy live chickens, live fish, fresh vegetables and fruit. Everything's fresh. Nothing. Of course, they don't know what a freezer is over there. At least in the small markets or small villages, they don't. But you buy everything right there and then. Very nice, actually. Very good. The food is fantastic. This guy is, if there's any water anywhere, they're growing something in it. This, I forget what they call this, but it's kind of a delicacy, and it's very good. And he's also pulling that skinny scum stuff off there to feed fish. There's another pond right next to this one just full of fish. So he's an aquaculture farmer. There's a little corner grocery store. They sell just like SIM cards and a couple little bitty things, hardly anything, but another thing would be nice. Okay, anyway, I was talking about religion. It's mostly a mix of Buddhism, and in the South, heavily Catholic. In the South, you can be a little bit more open with your religion, Christianity. Mainly because Americans were there for so long, and the French occupied Vietnam before we went into Vietnam. The French were there for about 100 years. So all the architecture in Vietnam, which didn't get blown up by us, is pretty much like you're in France or in Europe. It's bizarre. It's beautiful. Beautiful architecture. In the northern part of Vietnam is where you get into, like my wife is into animism, which is an ancient religion that basically uses magic and ghosts. Really bizarre kind of things where like at her home they have a big mirror, like a shoplifting mirror up on the house because if a ghost comes in, it'll see itself and take off. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of different. But anyway, there is one church, and I have a slide up here somewhere. There's one big Catholic church in Hanoi. It's the only Christian church that I've ever seen in the north of Vietnam. You'll see churches in the south of Vietnam, but in the north you will see none. There is one large Catholic church there that, if the story is true, I don't know, but apparently during the war, the Vietnam War, the Pope had told us and the Vietnamese, if anything happens to this, you'll pay for it. So it did not get bombed. And it is still there today. I was there on Christmas time, Christmas Eve, and there were a lot of Catholics that were there at the church, and the army came in to remove them, to get everybody out of there because they hate religion, they hate the Catholic Church. And the people fought them back. And it was interesting. There were so many people and so few army people that the army guys just gave up. So, yeah, it was kind of cool. It was very, very kind of emotional. Very neat. Anyway, the currency is the Vietnamese dong. And I have some here. 2 million dong equals $100. So what I'm handing you, 2,000 is 9 cents. If you like, take one of those. I've got tons of them. Take some money. I've got tons and tons of those. I mean, they use them to light cigarettes over there. It's about all they're worth.
That's D-O-N-G, is that right?
D-O-N-G, yeah, yep. Unemployment in Vietnam pre-pandemic was about 2% because of the young labor force and the mass amount of factories. Labor force there is about 40% agriculture and about 30% industry. The agriculture is dropping really rapidly. They are a member of the World Trade Organization. They have been since 2007, and in 1977 they joined the United Nations. They were not in the United Nations during the war. They only joined 2 years afterwards. Okay. Their language is a tonal language like Chinese, where it goes up and down. So they use most of our Western or Greek alphabet, most of it, not all of it. Very difficult, supposedly a very difficult language to learn. I know I can't hardly say anything in Vietnamese. I learned a little bit of Chinese, and it was much easier to learn. The Vietnamese in the United States, there's about 1.3 million Vietnamese in the United States. Most of those came after the war, 1975. From 1975 into sometime in the 90s, we had a program where if you had worked for the U.S. government or had any kind of affiliation with the South Vietnamese Army, you could come here. A visa was issued to you immediately. Then they had the boat people, which happened in the 80s, where people were escaping Vietnam, and they came in boats. And most of them were picked up by military, and a lot of those people here, I know actually a few of them here in the U.S. So there's about 1.3 million here in the U.S.
I have a nephew who's married to a little girl that came over on the boat. Her last name is Tran.
Yep, they have a popular name. Yep. Yeah, interesting. I bet she has quite a story. Was she a little bitty kid?
Yeah, very, very.
I know a guy that he was like 13 when he escaped Vietnam, and he walked all the way to Thailand through the jungle. Took him like 2 months. And horrible story. The climate there is tropical in the south, subtropical in the north. They do not get snow. If they get frost, everybody gets in their car, gets on a bus or a motorbike, and they go and they look at it and take pictures because it's so cool looking. Frost on a tree, and they're taking pictures. When my wife came here, I flew there and picked her up. When she got her visa, I flew there. I had 3 days that I had to be back in class. I flew there, picked her up, and came back. I logged 20,000 miles in like 3 days. We landed in Detroit in a snowstorm. She looked out the window, and she thought she was in like some kind of heaven. She's like, is it like this everywhere in America? I hope not. I'm worried about de-icing the plane to go to St. Louis, and she's just staring out the window, you know. Very cute. So now she goes out and plays in this. She just loves it. We all, you know, sometimes don't so much. Anyway, the climate there is the hottest place I've ever been. It is unbelievably hot in the summertime. The humidity is 100%, and the heat is just unbearable. It's not unusual to be 100, 105, and 100% humidity. And they don't sweat. I don't know why, but they don't sweat. It's very odd. They just don't ever seem to really, it doesn't bother them. Of course, they're acclimated. But.
So when my son was in Baghdad, when he was served over there, he said they had to wear all their full gear, and he said it would be 110 degrees
Yes.
there, and at first you were like, I'm going to die.
Yes.
Your body got used to it.
Yes, I read about a lot of soldiers, U.S. soldiers, that just simply just collapsed, just couldn't take it. And some of them did die from heat exhaustion. What's really odd is that they all wear long sleeves.
Mm-hmm.
They cover their faces because they want to be light colored. They don't like the sun tanning them. They say that the only peasants have tans is a saying, that only the poor people have tans because they have to work outside in the sun all the time. Which is unusual odd for farmers to say that because they work outside all the time. But my wife is always completely covered, always, even to this day. She does not like the sun. She doesn't want any, they want to be as light as possible, which is not unusual in the Asian culture. But, when I told her about tanning beds and things, she's like, why would anybody do such a stupid thing? And she sees me like real dark, and she's like, why do you need to cover up? I'm like, I like the sun. Anyway, okay. Trying to get to the rice field here. Again, tourism is very, very cheap and safe to be in Vietnam. The big cost is the airfare to get there. From here, it costs you around 900 round trip. But hotels there, a really nice hotel can be had for $40 a night. That includes food too. It's an amazingly cheap country to travel in, and very, very safe. The hospitality is incredible. Don't let them do your laundry though. Okay. They threw my white shirts in with some like pink stuff. And, I have pink shirts now. Anyway, tourism is great. Who goes there? In the north, you'll find Russians and Chinese. In the south, you'll find Europeans and Americans and Australians. There's that distinctive difference. In Nha Trang, the Russians own about half of Nha Trang. They keep it as their own private little place to go. And the Chinese love it there too. Tourism from 2016 to 2019 nearly doubled from 10 million visitors to 19 million. This last year, 19 million visitors. Almost doubled from 2016. They have rebuilt almost all their airports or built new airports. Their visa restrictions have been lifted. It's much easier to get a visa. You can fly into an airport, pick up a 30-day visa for very little money. A lot more domestic flights. Very easy place to travel around. It's very nice. You can jump on a flight and fly from the top of the country to the bottom of the country for less than $100. So it's very, and most of their planes are new. The government owns all the aircraft. The government makes money. They don't have taxes there. They don't tax people, but the government owns most of the hotels, the airlines, restaurants, everything. So that's where they make money. Anyway, let me get through this, then we'll get on to the rice field. The difference between North and South Vietnam, of course, we went in the 1960s to try to stop the spread of communism from China into the north of Vietnam. And the North Vietnamese, there was two separate countries, North Vietnam, South Vietnam. North Vietnam was communist. They were trying to take over South Vietnam and spread, communism. And that's why we went in the 1960s, was to stop that. And we thought that would be an easy thing to do. It turned out not to be so easy. Before that, prior to that, the French had been there until 1954. The only other people to occupy Vietnam in modern times were the Japanese during World War II. To this day, the Vietnamese do not like the Japanese. They like their money and they like their manufacturing plants, but they don't like the Japanese. The Japanese were very brutal to them. At least that's their history. That's what they tell everybody. However, they like us, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But anyway, tourism is it's a great place to go. It's fairly easy to get to, not easy to get to, but from St. Louis, nowhere is easy to get to. So it usually takes me 4 or 5 airplanes and 3 or 4 airports and about 25 to 35 hours to get there. Yeah, I take a Southwest from St. Louis, round trip St. Louis to LAX, and then I take a round trip Chinese airline or another airline from LAX to Vietnam and back to LAX. It's cheaper that way and a little bit easier. Okay, so anyway, enough of that. Let's get into the fields. And also I say that if you're going to go to Vietnam, go to North Vietnam as well as the South. I call North Vietnam the real Vietnam. That's where it's not, South Vietnam was leveled during the war. There was not much left. So a lot of that has been rebuilt. And a lot of it is being rebuilt in a Western style. So you have big skyscrapers, metal and glass. Things don't look, you sometimes think you're in Chicago or somewhere and not Saigon. But when you get to the north, it wasn't tore up as much as the south part of the country. It is still fairly pristine and very, French architecture. They've preserved everything. They don't have a lot of giant skyscrapers and metal and glass. It really is the real Vietnam. And the people there are completely different than they are in the South. They're not near as Western. The people in the North speak different than the people in the South. It's just an entirely different experience. But the North, to me, is really the real Vietnam. Plus, you don't run into much of those Americans, everywhere. It's always the young American backpackers that are drunk and acting stupid, it's like, man. Okay, some quick facts about mechanization. Let's finally get to that. Probably way behind. This is Hanoi here, a very busy, crowded. The addition of cars is relatively new because of newfound wealth that has just happened in the last decade or so. People can afford cars. And of course, when you can afford cars, the bigger the better, even when the roads are like this. So you got big cars and motorbikes. It doesn't always turn out so well for the motorbikes, but the streets are extremely narrow. They were built for bicycles and ox carts. They weren't built for cars, and people will still just take their bicycle full of bananas right down the middle of the street. Beautiful, beautiful place. It's a famous lake in Hanoi. Very nice, very clean. This is the Catholic church in Hanoi, and it has survived. I forget how old it is, but it's 100 and something years old, and it has survived a lot. And it is still standing, and people go there and worship. The government doesn't like it, but people do, and it's kind of a cool iconic place in the middle of Hanoi. Again, here's the knife. Always kind of reminded me like of one of these really bad movies that you see. These people are carrying around these knives, sometimes double-fisted. It's like spooky.
That's a traditional hat, I take it?
Yes, that's called a non-la, which is a cone hat. Well, we call it the cone hat. And it's always funny when you see all these tourists from America getting on a plane and heading home, and all of them are trying to wear cone hats in the plane. But yeah, so here she is carrying her load of, this rice had just been cut, and they haul that out, and you'll see what they do with it. You can see here a lot of smoke. the reason why there's so much smoke, and you'll see like this stuff here, this is the straw. This is the seed or the grain has already been taken off, has been threshed. And so the rice has been taken off of these, what's left is just straw. It used to be that they would feed straw to what we call water buffalo or other animals, and they also would use it for cooking. They dry it out and they use it for cooking, for burning, for fuel. Everybody now has propane or electric stoves. So there's just a few holdouts that still use it for cooking. So they just burn it. There's nothing else to do with it. And it absolutely chokes the city to the point where I had to get out of there. At some point, I just couldn't take it anymore. My eyes were burning. I couldn't breathe. And I was taking pictures, I think it was this day, and a lady was saying something in Vietnamese to my wife. And I was like, what's she saying? What's she saying? She says, please don't show this to Americans, all this smoke, because I don't want them to think that we're polluting the planet, but we don't have anything else to do with this. And I'm like, hey, come to my house after the leaves fall off the tree. So they're very conscious of it. They know that it's not good to do this, but they no longer have livestock around. You can see, there's burning right there, barefooted. A lot of people work in the fields barefoot. And there are snakes, there are poisonous snakes, there are a type of like a scorpion type creature that can sting the heck out of you. There's all kinds of things you can step on. But a lot of these people are barefoot. They're both barefoot. And she's hauling out her load of grain. You can see here it's busy. And look at all the fire. I mean, there's just smoke just everywhere. But everybody's in these fields. I want you to notice that these rice paddies, most of them are about a quarter acre. That's their size. And so all of these are owned probably by different families. And some may be owned by have multiple paddies. But there's little water irrigation things that run through here. And that brings the water in and floods the paddies after they plant the rice. And then when they're ready to harvest it, they're able to drain all the water out. Okay, so these are all just different people from the village, and these are all different, just dozens of different fields. You can even see different colors. And the different colors may mean the different types of grain or different types of rice, or they were planted at a different time. So they're maturing at a different rate. Another problem with mechanization that we'll get into here in a second. Again, this is one of my wife's neighbors. She had just finished. She has a bunch of straw there. And what she's doing with that, I have no idea. She has one of these. And I forget what they call these. This basket is made out of bamboo strips and was made by my wife's grandfather. This is pretty old, but they use this to sort rice, to clean rice. But it's very cool. I mean, these things are very intricate.
Does rice go through?
I think that's how it works. I'm not real
Yeah.
sure, Frank, because I never really saw anybody using one for things other than carrying stuff.
How is it threshed? I mean, once they cut it, then what happens?
Well, I'm going to show you. Anyway, so this is unhulled rice. This is rice that has been threshed, and it's a seed, but it has not been hulled yet. Rice has a skin coating on the outside. Before you get to the white part, it has a skin, a protective skin around it, and it has to be hulled, and I'll show you how that works. But this is a neighborhood woman that she just got out of the field and just brought her stuff home. Here they're drying rice. And I'll show you what unhulled rice looks like. Because don't tell anybody, but I broke the TSA rules and I brought some agriculture home with me. I could have like infested the whole planet, I guess, with strange bugs or something. Huh? Oh, I know. But look at my disguise; it's really good. And I was acting like I.
Trade stories, because I'm on the watch list.
No, I know I am. I was acting like I was eating this too, like it's candy. It's like, I really was. I was really into it. I was like, you watch, I'm going to get away with this. And I did. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, you can open this up and feel it if you want to. It's this is unhulled rice. This is right after it gets threshed. have gotten in a lot of trouble bringing that in. And what was really scary is after I brought it home, I opened it up and a bug flew out. And I was like, oh, that's what I said. And I was able to get it and kill it. And then, yeah, my wife was really pissed. So I had to dry it. I dried it a whole bunch more in a little room, and it's good now. I don't think I've ruined the rice fields in southern Missouri. Okay. Anyway, let me show you this. What do I do with my clicker thing? She's drying some rice here. Again, here's some straw that they're putting out. This is grass, or the rice has been cut, and they're drying this out. They will use this for something, probably fuel, probably cooking. Now, this is the only lady, according to my wife, in the whole village that actually cooks with straw. So she's drying this out. They just put it anywhere, and she'll dry that out, and then she'll cook with it. And see the same thing.
It's a beautiful thing.
Oh yeah, exactly. Again, here's just burning and. Okay, now this is a thresher. All right, this is the only mechanized thing that they do use in traditional rice farming in Vietnam. This thresher is where they take the cut rice and they feed it through there, and it separates the grain from the straw. So what's left over is the straw that they burn, and the rest goes into, you can see this is all seed, this is all rice. It goes into these bags. You can see they just feed it in there, it's cut, they feed it in here, and it comes out down here. The actual rice just comes out of the bottom. This guy charges you like $5 to stick your stuff in there. And look how he's driving that. He sits on this little thing, and it's motorized. And he just goes up and down the little road there. And 100% of Vietnamese use these. Everyone in Vietnam threshes through one of these threshers. The other way is just way too laborious and just too much. And it's extremely cheap. You can see there, they're just feeding it in, and then that just shoots out the grass, the straw, and the seed comes out the bottom.
Is that steam powered or gasoline?
No, it's gas.
Yeah.
It's gas. It makes a crazy sound. It's like chugga, 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 chugga. Yeah, you can hear him coming from like a broken train or something. But you can see it's pouring out of the bottom here. It works very well. I see there's very little waste. That it's actually very efficient. Now this is interesting here. My wife took me here. I would have never seen this because it was enclosed. What this lady does all day long is she takes the rice that's like in there. This is unhulled. This has not been cleaned. So she takes this and she puts it through a machine that peels the hull off, and now the rice is ready to eat. So that's what she does. That's her only job, and she does very well. So people bring hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds to her every day. And that's all she does, they say, all day and night, is just do this. And it is so loud in there and hot that I don't know how it's probably why she didn't answer any questions. I couldn't hear. Again, this is everybody has their own way of harvesting. This guy has a couple of cows. The water buffaloes are gone basically from Vietnam. You know, the iconic water buffalo that you see in the Vietnam movies and the big. I have a picture of one here in a minute. They're almost all gone. They don't use them anymore. But they do use cows, and these cows are precious. They're very expensive. He's going to use that for feed of some kind. Here again is some straw that somebody's just drying out. They use straw or rice seed. They just spread it on the road. And even along the highway, like you go out on the Interstate 70, there would be grain along the side of the road for miles. Just rice, drying. It takes 2 to 3 days of no rain to dry rice that way. She's doing it. This lady here is spreading out the rice for it to dry, and she's just on the side of the road. She just lays down a tarp, pours her rice on there, and she's drying it. And once it's dry, she'll take it to the lady to take the hull off, and then the rice will be ready to eat or to sell. There's water buffalo. We call it water buffalo. I don't, some soldier must have came up with that because there's no name. There's no such thing as a water buffalo, and they hate that term. You don't want to say that there, but everybody does. All the Americans always say, "Oh, look, a water buffalo," and they're like, "Ugh." But they're huge, and they're beautiful animals. Most of them are real slick, almost like they have oil on them. I mean, they're beautiful, beautiful creatures, just massive. This guy has cows. Now, the cows have replaced the buffalo, so the buffalo are almost all gone, and it's one of their iconic images that they have lost in the last 20, 30 years or so, sadly. Here we go. This is a little rice combine. We think of combines as the one going across the Kansas wheat field, you know, and it is a combine. These are made specifically for rice paddies. These are made, most of them are, here's another one. Now this is, I happened to be there in the village when the first rice combine showed up. First time ever in the history of that whole village. I was there the day it showed up. And I was like, wow, it's a gift. And here it is. This is a Kubota. 85% of all rice combines in Vietnam are made by the Japanese tractor manufacturer Kubota. They have figured out a way to make these things that are extraordinarily reliable, and they have set up service and parts places all throughout the country to supply parts. There's, I think, roughly around 15 to 20,000 of these sitting in the country now. 10 years ago, there was almost none. So it's coming on that quick. They charge you about $50 to cut your field. And that's talking about a field that's maybe half the size of this room. Okay, we'll get into that. So some quick facts about mechanization. Rice farming takes up about 80% of the farming land in Vietnam. Okay, the other 20% is aquaculture, coffee, and cashews, and dragon fruit, some other things. But about 80% of the total farm area is in rice farming. They grow, the country grows about 40 million metric tons, which comes out to about 88 billion pounds. That's a lot of rice. They're fifth in the world in production of rice, behind China, number 1, India, Indonesia, and Bangladesh. But they are third in the amount of exports in rice. The average rice paddy, and that's P-A-D-D-Y, size per farmer is about 1 to 2 acres is the most that they will farm. I think my in-laws, it's about what they have, maybe an acre, acre and a half. The average rice farmer makes about $1,200 to $2,000 per year. That's it. Yeah, when I was first talking to my fiance on Skype, I noticed that she had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds of rice bagged up at her house. And I'm like, what are you doing with all that? Why don't you sell it? And she said, well, waiting for the price to go up. And I said, well, how much will you get out of that? Well, probably around maybe $100, $200. I said, for all of that? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, it took you 3 weeks to harvest that. Why in the world would you do that for a couple $100? She says, well, we got to eat. And the rice farmer farms for food. Whatever they have left over, they sell. So, stupid American question. Yeah, so that's another reason I'm going to get into here why farming, this mechanization is a danger to their way of life. I mean, literally a danger. Anyway, some other quick facts about mechanization. The biggest threats to rice farming today is weather. They do have cyclones. They have all kinds of crazy weather. In Vietnam, flooding is very common. You got to remember it's very low. It's like New Orleans. It's a very low-lying land. Also, pesticide use, which is very sad in Vietnam. They use pesticides unregulated, and it kills every living thing anywhere around. Nothing survives it. Yeah, it's just sad. Regional commodity prices. One of the problems with a communist country is the country will make deals with Thailand or China, and they will allow Thailand or China to flood their country with rice. The rice quality in Vietnam is fairly low. It's not a real high quality. The quality of rice from Thailand or China is much higher. Like jasmine rice. If you ever buy rice, it's called jasmine rice. They don't grow jasmine rice in Vietnam. They grow a much lower quality but higher yield. So they'll flood the country with rice sometimes. It makes your rice worth nothing. Literally worth nothing. So that's another reason why they do want to get into mechanization, because they can grow better rice. Anyway, the switch is on from the government wants them to switch from a high quantity, poor quality rice to a high quality, lower yield rice, because the idea is that farmers can make more money because they're more marketable. They can sell that higher quality rice much easier than they can sell the low quality stuff. So the idea is that the farmers will actually make more money in the long run. Most farmers I've talked to say that's just not true. There's just no way. Anyway, the switch from the small family rice paddies to large corporate farms is based on the need for larger farm areas when using machinery. These machines cannot go in and cut rice in these small little paddies because, one, everybody's growing at a different rate. So you have to cross other people's paddies to get to so-and-so's. And maybe yours isn't ready, or maybe you're not even contracting with the guy to cut your land. I'm going to show you a slide of what happened to my in-laws' property when one of these came through it. Anyway, it's not very efficient for these small machines to cut rice on very small areas. They need large land plots in order to do it very efficiently. So tractors are used for tilling, for seeding, for spraying. Combines are used for cutting, and the threshers are what you saw with the little guy on the guy on the little machine putting the straw through. Mechanical threshers, like the one I just showed a while ago, have been around since about 1974. There's about 100,000 of them in use in Vietnam, and 100% of rice paddies use them. Mechanization has been slow to grow because of cultural and economic reasons, but also just because of difficulty to obtain parts and things like that. It's just very, very difficult. They don't make their own machinery like this in Vietnam, so they have to rely on other countries to get parts and service, and anything can go wrong at any time with that kind of stuff. These are, again, the little kids. Success of the combine. Okay. We saw the Kubota Combine, and it's what's being used today. About 85% of the combines are these Kubota types. They charge about $50 per acre to cut that. When you're only making a few $100 maybe on a harvest, that can cut into your profit pretty quickly. A lot of farmers don't think it's worth it. A typical combine owner can fully pay for the machinery in about 2 years. That is how successful it has become. The rapid growth of these combines started in about 2011. From 2011 to 2013, the government saw to it that they would bring in from 7,000 machines currently to 15,000 within 2 years. The government's behind this. Recently, the growth in the northern regions where my wife is from has skyrocketed, and as I said, I was there when the first one showed up. Kind of interesting that the guy wasn't sticking around the machine. Most of the farmers don't like it. Reasons for mechanization include it increases production of high quality rice, which does lead to higher incomes and greater export marketability. It's very difficult to sell Vietnamese rice to markets like the U.S. It's just not high enough quality. Also, machinery reduces the post-harvest loss. The loss is when you're doing it by hand, you're dropping seed or you're dropping stuff, or when you send it through a thresher, you're going to lose a certain percentage of it. like any crop that we have here. The combines are extremely proficient and have cut the loss by up to 10%. 1% loss, and this is for the whole nation, if 1% loss is about $15 to $20 million. So if you can reduce that loss by 5% or 10%, that's a lot of money that you're not leaving on the ground. And this is what the government's telling people. What the government wants to do is they want to rehabilitate a lot of idle land for large-scale rice production. What that means is that probably the government will own the land, and they'll make the money off the rice. They also want to bring the Vietnamese farms into the modern era, because they say that at some point your aging workforce is going to be gone. If you ever want the young people to get involved in this, you're going to have to make it less labor intensive. You're going to have to give them machinery. They'll sit on a machine, but they're not going to go out there and cut rice all day. And I think that's true. Also, they say that mechanization can help fight things like climate change. Rising temperatures has meant that a lot of the fields have stayed muddy for a long, long, long time. These machines can now go through that and do that. People cannot cut rice if they can't stand in the field. You literally sink in the mud. So you have to wait for it to dry, and sometimes that leads to a high crop loss. Mechanizations also will fight the fact that the young people are heading to the factories. You're not going to have a labor force to go out and cut rice. You need big machines to go and do it. One machine can do what dozens and dozens of people can do manually. The reasons against mechanization, and this is where I'm going to wrap it up. From what I've seen and what people have told me, these things are very impractical. Okay, I really want to find this this slide of what it does. I know it's in here. At least it was. Maybe it's not. Okay. Anyway, no, that's not it. I don't know where it went. Anyway, if the field's muddy at all, these big machinery come through and it just leaves these massive ruts, just like some kid in a four-wheeler going through somebody's yard. I mean, it's just these massive ruts which people have to fix by hand. Also, mechanization is geared towards large corporate-style farms. It takes the family out of it, all right, completely. It's a significant loss of family lands, which is basically the only thing people own. This is the only thing people can make money from that. A 50-year-old woman is not going to get a job in a factory. They only hire like 16 to 30-year-olds. That's it. They won't hire anybody older than that. They just won't do it. Also, families are going to use, under the use or lose rule, families are going to lose their lands. It is about the only thing these families have. Without my in-laws having their land, they don't have anything. It's a sense of pride to have land and to use it. Another problem is going to be the cost of paying somebody to harvest your rice really hits your profit. Okay? If you've got to pay, every time you've got to pay somebody to do something, that's less money in your pocket. And when you're talking about only making $1,200 to $2,000 a year, that's significant. My in-laws actually did do some mechanization last year, and they weren't happy. They weren't happy with it. Anyway, finally, village rice farmers, they're proud of their rice. Even on some of their money, they put rice plants on their money. It is what saved them during every war they've ever been in. During the Vietnam War, Ho Chi Minh, the leader of Vietnam, said if it wasn't for the rice farmers, we would have all starved to death. And so, I mean, that's a huge thing. You can't eat money. And that's what, so people, everybody has rice. If you go in any home at any time, 3 times a day they eat rice, morning, noon, and night. It's constant. I've eaten more rice in the last couple of years than I probably have in a lifetime. Anyway, finally, it is a sense of pride. Rice to Vietnam is as iconic as the cone hat, which I was going to bring and I didn't bring, or the water buffalo. Okay, rice is what has kept that country going, and I hate to see it. I hate to see it go away. And as one politician wrote a book that says it really does take a village, and I think it does. So, anyway, that's it.
Question.
Yes.
So,
Excuse me.
if some of these people only make $1 a day or whatever, and they can't get the kids to do it. You said they grow stuff like cashews and other stuff. Is that land that's good for rice also good for
No,
cashews?
no. Every area, like a lot of the rice fields are. You see some of the rice fields in pictures that are kind of cheered and things like that. You don't see much of that in Vietnam anymore. But the cashews are growing like up in the mountains. The coffee's grown in the mountains. These are Central Highland people that I've never even been into the Central Highlands. It's difficult to get to. But most of the land is very flat. It's like southern Missouri. It's just flat. And that's where, because it has to be flat to hold water. So there's nothing else to grow. Corn is the only thing that they grow, and corn's not worth anything. It's used for feed. They don't even need it. They use it for feed mainly. They sell it for feed. And they only grow corn because it's a crop that they can grow in between rice seasons. But the rice, literally, without having the rice, it takes away, I think, sustenance. It takes away a safety net of food. If you no longer grow rice, you have to buy it. And the odd thing is that the young kids today, I say kids, I'm talking about people 20, 30 years old, they have money now because they work in the factories. Guess what? They don't even buy Vietnam rice. They like to buy Thai rice because it's more expensive and it's higher quality and it's cool, So they'll go buy them a nice Samsung-made rice cooker and go buy their expensive rice. I mean, they won't even eat their own rice. So these kids are completely not into it. They're not into going out and cutting rice all day.
So when we went from Missouri to Florida, we passed through several states, and we looked over, and I said, what is that?
Rice.
It was rice.
Yeah, there's a ton of it in southern Missouri. I used to live in Poplar Bluff, and you drive from Poplar Bluff to like Dexter or over to Sykeston, bunch of rice. Missouri actually grows a lot of rice. Right. Yes, that's right. Yep. Yep. South, especially down in the Boot Hill and that area. Yeah. Missouri grows a lot of rice. Rice and Rice has farms in southern Missouri. But yeah, it's very sad. I hate to see a culture go, and it's going to happen because there are no kids in the field. There's hardly anybody under 50 out in those fields, and there's hardly any men. Very, very few. Yes.
And you talk about differences between North Vietnam and South Vietnam. Were some of these government enforced or just cultural?
It's culture, and it's left over from the Vietnam War. People were I don't know that most people during the Vietnam War, from what I've been told by the old timers there, they just wanted to be left alone, basically. It's kind of like they didn't really care if they were communist or not. They just wanted to farm and do their thing. But there became this hatred between people in the North who perceived, whether rightfully or not, that people in the South were American and were on our side, and hated the Vietnamese, which really isn't true. I've never met a more patriotic people, South or North Vietnam, than the Vietnamese. They're extraordinarily patriotic, very, very strange. They're not allowed to fly flags, but they're very patriotic. They love being Vietnamese. They love who they are. It's something I wish we had here. Sadly, we really need it here now. But they're very patriotic, whether for good or for bad. They love their country, and you don't want to mess with them.
And now, is the government attitude toward religion different in the North than in the South?
It seems to be. In the South, it's not really very enforced, and I think it's because most of the government officials that might be closet Catholics live in the South. There's a lot of Catholicism in the South and a lot of Christianity, but yeah, it's not enforced in the South, but in the North it is.
What's the nature of the enforcement in the North?
You know, I don't think it's as bad as in China where they bulldoze your church. Literally, we'll just bulldoze it down. They've done hundreds and hundreds of churches in the last couple of years in China. But in Vietnam, they just shut you down. They just lock it up. You're not going to worship here. And it's pretty, I think it's people are scared. But in the South, people aren't scared. You'll see Catholic, people openly being Catholic or being Christian. And it doesn't seem to, there's not that much fear in the South. But the South is completely different than the North. It is like two different distinct cultures and countries. Although it's one country, it really seems.
Is French still spoken in the South?
Is what?
Is French still spoken in the South?
Not really. I think that you'll only find French-speaking Vietnamese. They used to teach French until not that long ago. Now the big push is on to teach English, and they don't do a very good job of that, I can tell you that.
I was wondering how much tourism affected the South and religion, because if it's mostly American tourists going down there and they're reliant on American dollars, I know from my experiences overseas that wherever there's like a high tourist area, they don't necessarily do the traditional stuff. They do what the tourists want.
They tolerate it. Yeah, that's a great point, actually. Yeah, because most of the tourists in the South are Christians, Catholics, you know, the Europeans, the Americans. You hardly see an American in the North. I mean, I rarely, more and more you do, but you rarely run into, it's mostly Chinese, mostly Asian. They don't get near the tourism in the North as they do in the South. The North has a feel, a little bit more totalitarian feel to it than the South does. The South, and even my wife says, oh, those women from Saigon, they're slutty types, and they wear short pants, and like they wear makeup, and like, oh my, how 1973 of them, But that's the truth. They think that the Northerners think that the Southern women are loose and listening to all that rock and roll and drinking and smoking cigarettes, and it's still like that, and it's like kind of a cute, naive kind of thing, but. Like when you go swimming, like in the South, in the ocean, women or girls will wear swimsuits. Not in the North. They go in the water wearing jeans and shirts, fully clothed. Yeah, pretty rare to see a Vietnamese girl wearing a skimpy bathing suit in the North. In the South, well, no big deal. But yeah, there's a distinct difference between the South and the North. And if I'm going to go party with a bunch of guys, I'm headed to the South. But if I want to get a culture experience, I'm headed to the North. But yeah, it's a cool experience. I love Vietnam. I really do. I've come to love the country, and we plan on living there at some point. The only thing I worry about is the medical. People say socialism is free everything. Socialism has free nothing. In Vietnam, school textbooks, do you have to pay for those? Do you buy them from the teacher? That's how the teacher makes money. Yeah, I know, I love that concept. Of course, our kids won't buy textbooks anyway from me or from anybody. If you want to have surgery, my wife had to have emergency surgery. She had to give them her ATM card, and they went and withdrew the money. You have to pay for it before. If you want to eat, you better have a relative or a friend bring you food in the hospital, because they're not going to feed you. Yeah. So you pay for your surgery. It's like a la carte. It's like, okay, well, how much is an appendectomy? Can we just do half of it now? And maybe can I get on a payment plan? It's crazy. I've been in the emergency room there in Vietnam. It's just a bloody mess and just a horrible experience. So, yeah, I'm a little hesitant about getting old and needing medical care in Vietnam. My dad just take me out to the field and leave. And that was another thing too that was interesting, is that I noticed like all these tombs that were out in the rice fields. I wish I had brought some of those pictures. And I asked my wife, I said, what in the world is this? I said, this guy's cutting rice around this around this tomb, this big, big tomb. And she goes, oh yeah, that's probably been there for 100 or 200 years. And no matter who owns the land, you are not allowed to move a tomb. So somebody died and buried right there on the family rice farm, and now that rice paddy doesn't belong to them anymore. But you don't move a dead person. You leave them there and you cut rice around it. So you have all these different places of tombs where people are buried, and they want to come. The government wants to come in and just level all that out of there, and people are like, "No, you're not." So it's kind of an impasse there. And in the north, they have in the animism, when you die, you're buried. In 3 years, to the exact day, 3 years later, you're dug up, and your body's cleaned. They take all the meat, whatever's left, and they strip it off, and then they move you to your permanent home, to your permanent place of burial. So I was going to go to, they were digging up Grandma, and I was going to go, but they wouldn't. Yeah, I was going to watch. There's a fascinating National Geographic documentary on that. But on the 3rd year anniversary, they dig them up and they move them to a permanent place. And people want like certain areas, like up on top of a little hill, or certain areas that are beautiful. They want to bury people. So what they do is, when the government opens up an area for burial, like a cemetery, people will go put fake headstones there and make it look like they're like saving their space. Yeah, it's like they're reserving their lot. It's like putting an orange cone there for parking. It's crazy.
No different than what we do to buy our own.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And they'll do that, and they might put 20 of them out there, and they've only got 3 relatives. That's the way it goes. So lots of cool stuff like that. It's kind of funky.
Can you say anything in the Vietnamese language to us?
Hello, can you say hello?
Let's have a bowl of pho. Yeah, pho is the soup that was made in the north. It's wonderful stuff, and there's always a fight over who makes better soup, the north or the south. So I think
Is it
the north
pho or
does.
pho?
Huh?
Is it pho or
It's
pho?
pho.
Pho, okay.
PHO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Canada, we always had an argument about
Pho or pho.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, no matter what I say, it's wrong. So,
Yeah.
but it's good stuff.
Oh, see, I don't.
You don't like it? Oh God,
So-
yeah. You either like it or you hate it. I love
And
it.
there's a lot of it I can't eat anyway because of my gout, so
Yeah,
I don't really have chicken or vegetarian.
it's the fish sauce that I run from.
Oh, I like fish sauce.
Do you?
I love it.
Everybody likes something different.
Yeah. I learned to cook some Vietnamese food. It's really good, but
I eat Vietnamese about once a week. I send you the
I know,
pictures.
you're
but it's a great country. So if you get a chance to go. They love Americans. They just love you, and they'll bring you in. I've never gone thirsty or hungry anywhere. I've had complete strangers just say, hey, yeah, come on, let's try to talk and stuff like that, and feed me, and just a fantastic experience. Best country I've ever been in. I've been in a few, and that's the best one I've ever been in, by far. By far. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
This one?
Thanks for coming.